Thank you for being here. Today we're talking about an idea so powerful, so deeply woven into the human experience that it has shaped cultures, laws, wars, and everyday lives. Heaven. A place of endless peace, joy, reunion, and perfection. For billions, it's the ultimate destination, the answer to suffering, the reward for goodness, the promise that life doesn't end when the body does. But why do people believe in it? What makes this idea so strong that it survives every era, every scientific revolution, every challenge from reason? That question isn't as simple as fear of death, even though that's part of it. The real reasons are layered, psychological, cultural, historical, emotional. If you've ever wondered why the hope of heaven feels almost universal, this conversation will take you deeper than easy answers. Before we go further, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to see the range of places and lives connected through this discussion. Now let's start at the root of the question. Why do human beings across almost every civilization imagine a perfect world beyond this one? It starts with something unavoidable: death. No matter who you are, where you live, what you believe, death is the one thing that stands at the end of every path, and we know it early. A child who loses a pet learns it before language can fully explain it. An adult who buries a parent feels it in their bones. The awareness of death is not an accident. It's part of consciousness, and with that awareness comes a deep, relentless question: what happens after this? For most of human history, that question had no clear answer. There were no brain scans to show consciousness fading, no biology to explain decomposition, no evidence-based way to measure what lies beyond. What we had were fears, hopes, and stories. And stories matter. They aren't just entertainment, they're survival tools for the mind. When the unknown threatens to crush us, we turn it into a narrative we can live with, and heaven is one of the most powerful narratives ever created. Think about what it offers. Life on earth is uncertain and often cruel. People you love die without warning. Injustice is everywhere. The guilty thrive, the kind suffer. Heaven steps in and says, this is not the end. Everything broken will be restored. Pain will vanish. Love will return. Justice will triumph. That is not a small promise. That is the ultimate cure for despair. Psychologists call this a meaning-making mechanism. When something feels unbearable, like permanent loss, the mind resists it. It searches for continuity, for patterns, for hope. Heaven fits perfectly into that gap. It transforms death from a wall into a doorway. That's why the idea appears in so many cultures, even those that never influenced each other. The names change, the details shift, but the dream remains. But there's more than fear and hope here. Heaven isn't just about escaping death, it's about solving the problem of unfairness. If life ends in the grave, then injustice wins too often. Corrupt leaders die in silk sheets, while honest people starve. Without something beyond, there is no cosmic balance. Heaven corrects that. It says, if not now, then later. If not here, then elsewhere. For people who have nothing, that promise is priceless. This idea also became a tool, not always consciously, but effectively. Anthropologists studying early societies noticed something interesting. Groups that believed in moralizing gods, watchers who reward good and punish evil, tended to grow larger and cooperate better. Why? Because belief in consequences, even unseen ones, changes behavior. If stealing risks eternal suffering, fewer steal. If generosity earns eternal joy, more give. Over time, this wasn't just personal comfort, it was social technology. Heaven helped build civilizations. And yet, that function came with a cost. When morality depends on paradise, doing good can become transactional. Not kindness for its own sake, but kindness as currency for a better address in eternity. Religious texts often reinforced this. Obey and enter paradise. Disobey and face torment. It worked, in a sense. It created order. But it also replaced responsibility with reward-seeking. Even now, surveys show that many link morality to belief in heaven, as if ethics cannot survive without cosmic oversight. Here's the question that few stop to ask. If heaven wasn't promised, would people still choose compassion? Would they still forgive, share, sacrifice? Or is goodness, for many, just an investment plan for the afterlife? That question matters because it reveals something uncomfortable. The idea of heaven shapes not just hope but motives. Now let's step into the emotional heart of this. If you've lost someone you love deeply, you know why heaven feels necessary. The thought that this is truly the end, that you will never hear their laugh, never feel their hand again, is almost unbearable. The human brain is wired to maintain bonds even after death. That's why people talk to photos, whisper to graves, dream conversations that feel real. Heaven doesn't just comfort, it completes the story. It says, you will see them again. The bond is not broken, only paused. That promise has more weight than any argument because it touches something deeper than logic: love. And what about identity? Life is short, fragile, often random. We build careers, families, reputations, and in an instant they can vanish. If all ends in nothing, then what was the point? Heaven answers, you matter, not for a moment, but forever. Your soul, your choices, your story, they continue endlessly. That sense of permanence is intoxicating because humans fear not just death, but insignificance. Now here's something fascinating. In societies where life is harder, belief in heaven tends to be stronger. Studies comparing nations show that in countries with high poverty, instability, or violence, afterlife belief is nearly universal. In wealthier, more secure nations, it declines sharply. Why? Because when this life feels like a paradise, you don't crave another one as much. But when this life feels like a burden, you need to believe the next will be better. This tells us something crucial. Heaven often thrives where hope is scarce. It's not simply about truth, it's about need. And needs are powerful drivers of belief. But let's ask the hardest question. What happens when someone stops believing? For some, it feels like losing the ground under their feet. If heaven was the framework for purpose, its absence can feel like chaos. That's why many cling even when doubts grow. They fear a collapse of meaning. And yet, countless people who left belief report something surprising. Life feels more urgent, more vivid. When paradise is no longer a guarantee, this moment becomes priceless. Love matters more because it isn't infinite. Acts of kindness matter because they aren't tallied on a cosmic scoreboard. They're just good for their own sake. Maybe that's the paradox. Taking heaven away doesn't make life emptier, it can make it fuller. Because now, instead of living for later, you live for now. Instead of expecting justice elsewhere, you fight for it here. Instead of dreaming of eternal reunion, you cherish the faces in front of you. Knowing time is brief. The real reason people believe in heaven isn't stupidity or ignorance. It's humanity. It's the deep refusal to accept loss, the hunger for fairness, the fear of nothingness, and the longing to matter. Heaven answers every ache of the human condition with a single word: forever. And that answer is so beautiful, so powerful, that even when logic tears at its edges, emotion stitches it back together. So where does that leave us? Maybe with this thought: even if heaven doesn't exist, the reasons we invented it tell us what we value most: love, justice, meaning. And those things don't need eternity to be real. They only need us, here and now. What's striking when you study this belief is how adaptable it is. Heaven changes its face depending on who's looking at it. In early cultures, it was lush fields for hunters, endless feasts for warriors, or beautiful cities of gold for kings. For others, it was peace after chaos, or reunion after pain. The concept is like water, shaping itself to whatever container the culture provides. That flexibility is part of its strength. Anthropologists note that heaven often mirrors a culture's struggles and hopes. For agricultural societies, paradise was fertile land and perfect harvests. For those living under harsh rulers, heaven became a kingdom where justice reigns. For the poor, it promised abundance. For the oppressed, freedom. In this way, heaven is less about theology and more about psychology and sociology combined. It's a reflection of what people long for most when they have it least. Here's something fascinating. When life expectancy was 30 or 40 years, when childbirth was deadly, when famine was common, the afterlife wasn't just comforting, it was essential. Without it, despair could swallow entire communities. Belief gave them resilience. Modern research even confirms that strong belief in heaven correlates with higher life satisfaction in regions of instability. This tells us that heaven isn't just a story. It has measurable effects on survival and coping. But the mind's role in this is deeper than comfort. Cognitive science shows humans are pattern-seeking beings. When we face uncertainty, our brain tries to impose order, even if it means inventing it. Death is the ultimate uncertainty. Our consciousness cannot simulate non-existence easily. It treats the self as permanent. That's why people often say, "I can't imagine not being here," because neurologically, imagining total absence is almost impossible. Heaven solves that by giving the mind something it can picture, a continuation of the self, a familiar sense of identity in a different setting. Yet belief in heaven isn't just shaped by fear of death or love of life, it's also tied to authority. Historically, rulers and religious leaders used paradise as both promise and power. Obey and eternal joy awaits. Disobey and eternal suffering follows. That dual mechanism, reward and punishment, proved more effective than any law code. You can hide from police, but you can't hide from an all-seeing judge in the sky. This isn't speculation. Historians have documented how empires leaned on this belief to maintain order across massive territories where enforcement was impossible. But does that make heaven merely a control tool? Not entirely. People didn't adopt it because kings told them to. They adopted it because it resonated with something personal: grief, guilt, hope. Control simply amplified what the heart already wanted to believe. And when something meets both personal and political needs, it spreads like wildfire. There's another dimension here: art and culture. Entire traditions of music, painting, and architecture grew from the vision of paradise. From Islamic calligraphy of gardens flowing with rivers to European cathedrals designed to reflect glimpses of heaven, the idea shaped beauty itself. And that beauty, in turn, reinforced the idea. People walked into shimmering halls of stained glass and felt closer to eternity. For many, that experience was enough to confirm the promise: if humans can build this, imagine what God can build for us. Now, fast forward to today. In many parts of the world, medicine stretches life, technology reduces hunger, and democracy offers some form of justice. When earthly conditions improve, reliance on heavenly justice weakens. That's why sociologists see a pattern. Belief in heaven declines fastest in nations with high security, education, and healthcare. When this life feels fairer, fewer people need the next one to fix the score. That's not an attack on faith, it's a statistical observation. But even in those societies, heaven doesn't vanish completely. It survives in subtler ways. In films about eternal love, in phrases like, "she's in a better place," in casual jokes about clouds and harps. Why? Because even when doctrine fades, desire lingers. The hope that death is not the last word is like gravity. It keeps pulling. One story illustrates this better than data. A hospice nurse wrote about her patient's final days. She said the most common theme was not fear of pain, but fear of leaving loved ones behind. People didn't beg for more time to earn money or finish projects. They longed for one more hour with family, one more laugh with a friend. And when she asked what gave them peace, many said, "Knowing I'll see them again." That tells us the core of heaven isn't about gold streets or crowns. It's about connection. Humans are wired for it. So when death threatens to sever that, we imagine a bridge. Heaven is that bridge. Here's the question, though. If heaven is a bridge built from hope rather than evidence, what happens when someone realizes it might not stand? Some feel despair at first, like losing oxygen, but others report something unexpected: relief. Relief from the fear of judgment, from the anxiety of never being good enough for paradise, from the guilt of failing an impossible standard. For them, stepping away from heaven doesn't remove meaning, it removes pressure. It allows life to be lived as a gift, not a test. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It often starts with questions that seem small. Why do different religions describe paradise so differently if it's the same place? Why does an all-loving creator need eternal punishment to enforce goodness? Why would a being beyond time need endless worship? These questions don't destroy faith instantly. They plant seeds of curiosity, and curiosity rarely stays still. But, and this is important, the rise of doubt doesn't mean people stop caring about meaning. In fact, it often makes them care more, because when there's no guarantee of forever, every hour becomes precious. Love becomes urgent. Justice becomes immediate. Instead of postponing goodness to another realm, people bring it here. Instead of praying for peace above, they fight for peace on earth. That's not theory. That's what countless former believers describe when asked what changed after leaving heaven behind. In a sense, this is the irony. Removing heaven doesn't make life smaller, it makes it bigger, because when you realize this is your only shot, you stop wasting it. You start asking, what do I truly value? Who matters to me now? What kind of world am I leaving for those after me? And those questions, though born from the absence of paradise, can create something just as beautiful, a heaven we build ourselves, not one we wait for. Thank you for listening. Share your thoughts below. What do you think draws people most to the idea of heaven? And if you knew this was your only life, how would you live it differently? Stay curious, stay thoughtful, and remember, sometimes the hardest truths make life the most precious